Hey everybody, it's Bevin. Welcome to Bevin, a femme over 40 and her friends podcast. I'm your host, Bevin. I'm here with my co-host, Biscuit Reynolds. And I'm so excited to introduce today's podcast. My friend Noemi Sparks has been on the podcast before. I'll post the link to her previous episode. But she is green and growing. There is always something new she's learning. She's totally a cosmic explorer of consciousness, of energy, and really about feeling good. I learned from Noemi this beautiful phrase, when you're feeling good, you're feeling God. And it's really just transformed my life. And it's so fun to be in community and friends with people who inspire me to continue to grow and level up, because they are also growing and leveling up. It's a scientific proven fact that you become the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with and the books that you read. And I intentionally curate that. I talk about this all the time about how when I'm on Instagram, I use my search bar as my guide, right? Like, because you can let the robot overlords run your attention, which is letting the algorithm do its thing and just scrolling, right? But you can utilize the search bar to intentionally learn from the people you want to learn from online. I am so curative of this because I noticed, because curating, right? Like I'm putting together my experience of the world, because I realized I was paying with my attention to whatever the algorithm wanted me to be paying attention to, right? And the algorithm is served by making you afraid, spiking your anxiety, and making you addicted to those apps, right? I've also heard you can turn your phone into black and white mode, which makes those apps less addictive. So that's a tool I want to pass on to you. But using my search bar, I noticed anybody who was over 10,000 followers just would not pop up in my feed unless I worked really hard to get to their information. And I want to learn from specific people who are serving their Instagram stories, which is like a once a day thing that disappears. I'm also really working on in my own life and my own development as an artist and where I want to be putting my creative energy. I'm working on finding ways to be not on Instagram at all, and figuring out how that's going to look for me. But all that to say, Noemi is definitely one of those good influences that you can curate. So I just basically, in my search bar, I want to finish this this thought. In my search bar, I have these 10 people. Like it's the top 10 is what comes up. You can also click a thing that says see all, and I've noticed I can add a couple more people there, but it's really helpful to getting the information that you want, the people whose streams are relevant to me. And it's all people I admire for some reason or another. Either they're artists that create like I want to create, they're people whose growth work I really admire, people whose connection to God I really admire, or who just teach things or are fun, right? But I'm really specific about it, and I think Noemi is one of those great follows because she is pumping out great information. But even more than just following on the Instagrams, I think the concept of Patreon as a way to connect with artists you love, I create my very best work for my Patreon page. And Noemi's doing that too. And it's just so fun to be in community with people and to create this, like, we call it a mycelial network, right? Where like mycelium, like the fungi, mycelium is the mother of us all. It's older than humans, right? And we have this like interconnected network of resources. So all sorts of self-care practitioners that are connecting and working together in our Patreon pages to add value to the world. So that's what Noemi is talking about in this episode, about working and providing in her Patreon page. So I hope that this episode will inspire you to consider supporting Noemi's Patreon and working with her one-on-one with tapping if you find that valuable. We have like a tapping exercise that's super powerful in this episode, but also potentially supporting my Patreon page, which is the whole reason why I'm able to do this podcast and provide this as a free resource. Patreon.com/FKDP is my Patreon page. It stands for Fat Kid Dance Party, which is my aerobics class for anyone who feels left behind by mainstream fitness. If you've ever been called too much, too fat, or felt too awkward to dance, mine is the supportive class for you. I truly believe that people find themselves, and it's a safe space to explore their true self on that dance floor. It is as much an inner child healing as it is an aerobics class. It's a lot of things at once. It's really tremendous self-care practice, and I'm so grateful to get to bring that to the earth and the world as my work. In addition to that, there's so many more exclusive things I don't share anywhere else that are on that podcast: spiritual self-care lessons, body love lessons, a whole podcast called Bevin's Bites of shorter little episodes with like advice and Reiki healings and meditations and things like that. So I hope you'll find value in that. It's a safe and secure site. Patreon.com handles all the billing. Once you're on one Patreon, it's just one bill. No matter how many supporters you or how many creators you support, that bill is just that once a month. They make it really simple, cancel anytime, but it's a super great way to support folks in the world who are making work that is valuable to you, and also getting the support and resources you need to heal in a world that frequently profits off of your self-loathing. And we talk more about mass media and things like that in this episode. So I hope you find this valuable, and I want you to imagine that you're on a virtual porch with me and Noemi, just whatever that porch could look like. Oh, imagine the tremendous view, imagine the sunset, and just imagine a cozy chair, maybe a wicker chair or a rocking chair or a recliner or a hammock, whatever you want to be in, and your favorite childhood blanket, cuddling up with me and Noemi. And I hope this helps. Love you so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the podcast, Noemi.
Thank you, Bevan. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. Thanks for being here. I always like to start business in the front. So first and foremost, will you tell folks about who you are and what you do and what you offer?
Yes, thank you so much, Bevan. My name is Noemi Sparks. I am an EFT practitioner and anxiety coach. I also call myself a life experience coach because I help people shift how they experience life. And the main thing that I've been working on this past year is helping people get through anxiety, especially with what's going on in the world right now, just a very specific kind of uncertainty in what is happening in the world right now. And I've been so grateful and fortunate to get to share this weekly with people through EFT tapping and different energy mastery practices. So I'm so excited to share that weekly. And then I also do coaching one-on-one for people who are ready to really do that deep work, dive in and check in, like, why am I not feeling good every day? So that's what I do in a deep, intensive one-on-one program that I call the Natural Anxiety Relief Method, that is now coupled with EFT and has become so much stronger. So I'm so excited to share a little bit more about that today and just to be here with you. Thank you.
Yay. And Noemi, like me, is on Patreon and has some really awesome offerings if you want regular self-care support. I cannot laud your tapping enough. Like, it's just, I've done tapping before and powerfully for years, but like, I'd never thought that doing tapping for more than like a 5 or 10 minute session was necessary. But like when Noemi started doing one-on-one hours, I was like, sure, I'll try it. And like, it's phenomenal. It's some really good stuff. And it's almost like less expensive EMDR in many ways. Everyone I know who's done EMDR therapy, 100 out of 100 people have said, oh my God, life-changing, right? And so I think just the methods are similar with tapping, but it's like, you call it tearless therapy. Is that what you
so there are some gentle techniques, and one of them is called Tearless Trauma, where instead of having to think about the thing that caused the trauma, you feel into the feelings in the body and you release that rather than having to go and re-experience the trauma again, which unfortunately is what happens a lot of the time in talk therapy. And when people are just sharing or venting, it's just strengthening those neural pathways when we're talking about things without processing the actual emotion that is still in the body.
It's so powerful and effective. And I have to say, I love talk therapy, so I do that too. But I feel like all of these things kind of work together. I think like if you're on a healing pathway and on a healing journey, trust your heart. Like the things that like intrigue your curiosity, pursue that. Like it's not just like one thing. It's not just talk therapy that works. It's not just tapping that works. It's like the synergy of all that. It's how you nourish yourself. It's how your behavior, how much sleep you're getting, like all of it affects everything in your experience of life. And so I just have to say, like, knowing Noemi and getting to be friends with her and watching her glow up and watching her curiosities, like, and developing and like getting this EFT practitioner certification and then like even leveling up into a new level of EFT. I'm excited. I love all the things that I get to explore with Noemi and all the gentle awarenesses too that I have in these tapping sessions. Like, it's interesting because you think about childhood abuse and trauma as I experienced You think that, or I would say, like, I would have predicted that most of my realizations would have been hard or rough. And in fact, they've all been gentle. And some of them have actually been delightful, like remembering and realizing, oh my God, my mom used to delight me like with money when I was a little kid, like just like little, suddenly she pulls into the McDonald's drive through and we get to get a Frosty cone, like just little things like that to delight me. I loved it as a kid, and like realizing, oh my God, she still does that now. Like I just get little presents from Costco on my porch, so all of this stuff, I think it can be really, most people are afraid of the way they're going to feel. And I think I was afraid a long time ago, I was afraid to do this kind of work because I was afraid of how I was going to feel. But it's so funny because like now that I know how I was going to feel, it's not so bad. And it's actually great because everything you feel, you're just processing so you don't have to feel it again. And with such a safe and calming presence as Noemi.
Absolutely. I feel like the big issue is people being scared, like you said, of how they're going to feel, but only because they don't know. They think it's going to be more of the same, but that's not what we're doing in EFT. EFT are emotional freedom techniques, right? So it's here to set those emotions free, to get them out of your body where they don't serve you anymore. So what I love to talk about is how energy helps us in the moment, that energy in motion, right? It's adaptive feelings like, oh, I see this thing out in front of me that I need to adapt to. I need to get out away from, this ball that's coming at me. I need to get to work on time. I need to hurry, do all the things. But once that stimulus is gone, once I'm not in that challenge anymore, I don't need that fight or flight anymore, that's when we need to find a way to release emotions from the body. Otherwise, they get stuck. And that's what happens with trauma. So whether that's big T or little t trauma, those are unresolved moments of emotion in the body that we just haven't been able to process yet. And what happens in EFT and really any of these kinds of therapies that help you feel safe is those emotions and memories can come up because the body's like, okay, it's safe now to let these go. And often that's what we're scared of, is feeling the same way again. But it's just often the body shedding and us just feeling it in the moment while we're breathing through it. But it releases so fast. It's such a fast process. Once you're feeling it and you're like, oh, I feel this anxiety because of that thing that happened to me when I was a kid. But even though that happened, I deeply and completely love and accept myself right now. And it's that shift in feeling, okay, I feel this emotion in my body. And I also know that right now I'm safe to feel that. And that's how we let go of the emotion. That's how it dissipates. That's how it just goes back to wherever it came from, back to Mother Earth, or wherever you imagine energy lives, is when we just feel safe enough to let it go. And that's why these gentle techniques are not scary, but it's the idea. It's always the idea of things that scares us more than the actual efficacy of the technique that we're trying out.
Yes, fear, false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
And yet, like, we all feel it, right? Like, it's such a common experience. And then in our system, we're socialized to really be controlled by our fears because afraid people are easier to control. And we've got billion-dollar industries who profit off our self-loathing and our fear and our anxieties. And so it's almost like if you're on a healing pathway, you really have to, in addition to doing this healing work, you also need to like kind of create more boundaries and barriers to how you experience the barrage of other things vying for your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So as energetic beings, especially empaths who are highly sensitive, it's really important to have these practices that help you protect your energy. And that's what I teach or will be teaching in a group program coming up. But it's all about getting into that habit of tuning in of, okay, this is how I feel right now. And this is how I want to feel. And then making sure that you are always tuning into that energy from within before reacting to something else that's happening on the outside. And as this comes up a lot in kind of, more spiritual areas, everything that we experience is a projection of our inner world. And the way I love to express that is how we're feeling is always a direct reflection of how aligned our thoughts are with our true nature. So when we're not feeling good, it's because we're having a thought that isn't aligned with us. And all we need to do is reach for the next best feeling thought. It's just that old programming that makes you not feel good, because feeling is something that is a habit. And we can change that with practice. And EFT is my absolute favorite way to practice feeling good.
I love it. And you're such a good tapping evangelist too. Like definitely a practice what you preach kind of gal. I'm gonna ask you a question that I asked you on my last podcast with you, But because you are a green and growing person, and I never invite people back on the podcast who I don't identify as green and growing, like gonna have new conversations. I want to ask again, like, what brought you into this work? And like, how is like your mission in life kind of continuing to sharpen as you continue to heal yourself?
So what brought me into the work was wanting to feel better, was realizing that I can feel better if I choose to look in a different direction. If my energy is pointing in another way, I'm going to be tuning in with that. And that's what I want. I want the freedom to tune into however I want to feel. And so this was probably back in around 2017, 2018, when I started reading a lot of self-help books about how to tap into happiness. I wanted to be happy. And I didn't really know what that meant at the time. But through different books, different practices, I realized it's all about tapping into that internal feeling of joy and intensifying that daily so that that can be my natural state. So when I wake up in the mornings, I wake up with a smile on my face because that's how I feel. That's my habit.
I love that. So you wanted to feel better. And so in the pursuit of feeling better, you're just like Santa Claus delivering tools to people.
Yeah. So like, it's one thing to start teaching little bits here and there. And that's, I think, what I know I started doing through yoga and through mindfulness and a little bit here and there. But what really, really changed is understanding that the body holds on to emotion. And that's what we need to be able to release in order to get to emotional freedom. If I want to be happy, I need to release all the old memories of not being happy and change how I feel about them. It's just like you said, when we did do these one-on-one EFT practices, and even though we're remembering a hard feeling or a hard memory, if we change how we relate to the memory and notice those spots of love, of compassion, of delight, that's how we change how we relate to the feeling and thus our own energy.
Yes. Okay. Not to take a hard right turn, but part of your healing practices that I want to talk about, specifically now in this series of talking to women about their psychedelic experiences. Will you talk to me? I know you've done toad medicine. I want to hear about that. And I know there's a couple other good psychedelic experiences you've had. You're such a good earth-based explorer of consciousness.
Thank you. Yes. So toad medicine is 5-MeO-DMT or Bufo alvarius is the toad name. It's a Sonoran desert toad that has a very it has a kind of venom that helps you completely shut off your nervous system. It's like a complete break. It's the unplugging of the internet to plug it, to get it back into that source of energy. And that's what you're doing when you take a vaporized hit of this Sonoran Desert's vapor, and you are completely out. So the way I did it the first time was pretty similar to the second time, but it's all about your intention going into it. So I saw a show called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia made by Viceland that talked about this Sonoran desert toad and the experience that it gave people. And when I saw that, I was searching for divinity. I wanted to experience God. And this is what resonated with me most as the safest and shortest psychedelic experience. So it's like 15 to 30 minutes max. And it completely gave me that surrender that I was looking for, so I could feel connected to something bigger than myself. And yeah, it unlocked how I experienced love in life the first time. And then the second time, it helped me really feel like I was that divine connection or the divine source of love. I was love the second time.
I was love.
I was.
I love that. That's kind of what I want to, not kind of, that is what I want to be in this lifetime. I think we're really here to master loving, and absolutely, especially ourselves, but also others, right? And I see it in this like infinity loop of energy. Like you give love, you receive love. It's not necessarily from the same spot, but it is like a flow of like giving, receiving. And so I love psychedelics for like dissolving those false barriers we create.
That's exactly it. Is what toad medicine helps you do, and many other psychedelics, is it gives you ego death. It helps you realize that you are not separate. It kills the idea of you, that unique individual that needs to fight, needs to hustle, needs to do anything in order to experience this life. whatever it is that you want. That intention is that really important part. What do you want to get out of it? That I think is really important to iterate for anyone doing psychedelic journeys, is go in knowing what you want to experience.
Yes, absolutely. Set an intention. I mean, it works for the morning too. If you get your morning journal by Noemi Sparks, which is available on Amazon, if only I had it right here.
Oh, you're so sweet. Oh wait, I do have one. Yeah, right here. Morning intention. Yeah. And it's so I love intention, but I love taking the woo out of it too. It's not just like, oh, I hope I feel good. It's more like, okay, this is what feeling good feels like. And I'm going to anchor this feeling into my heart in the morning so I can come back to this later.
Yes, absolutely. And also, I mean, this is what Abraham Hicks teaches all the time. It's just every time you're feeling off, you can just reset and go back to center. She says meditation. When I was early on my spiritual journey in my 30s, I was so annoyed that everyone's answer to everything was meditation. And like, but the thing is at the time I was really struggling with being consistent at meditation and all of that, right? So it's funny because that was like my biggest struggle. Now I'm pretty great at meditating, but like also, and by great, I'm still like monkey brain most of the time, but like I'm just consistent and like it works eventually. Like eventually you'll just be consistent enough and you will get the benefits. And if you start going off, just come back to your intention, come back to how you wanted to feel, anchor yourself.
Yeah, that's another reason why I love EFT, is it helps get people into that meditative state, especially people who have that monkey mind, so that like chattering ego going on, giving you all the little bits of information. Meanwhile, if you can bring another layer into it, so like tapping on the body while you're meditating, it really helps you stay in the present moment.
There's this like intensity about our egos where it just really wants to figure everything out. Yeah. And you know what? It's not your job to know everything. Like we're part of this like massive consciousness that can know everything. But you individually, Noemi, Bevin, like person on the porch with us, like you don't have to know everything. Like, and also, in fact, when we're confused, it's actually a really potent place to be. I think you talked about this once about confusion. Was that you?
We may have tapped on it.
No, maybe we tapped on it. Confusion is potency, right? Like the other side of uncertainty is possibility. And when you're confused, that's usually pretty good because it means the universe is like getting ready to bless you with something. I heard at a seminar this weekend, it was really interesting to hear this, that like success is chaos. Like sometimes like success is boring, right? Like when you really like are doing the work of success, it's boring. Like you're failing 80% of the time. Like it's uphill the whole way. You're just continuing to move forward. But it's also like chaos sometimes, because like when new stuff comes in, like you're like, I don't know if I can hold this, but like you can, because you wouldn't be given it if you couldn't. And most of the time when we don't have what we think we want, it's because God is preparing us to hold what we want, right? So, or what we think we want isn't actually what's coming for us, and it's something better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're never given anything that we aren't either ready to learn from, or, well, no, that's just it. We're going to learn from anything we're ever handed. And another reason why I love tapping, it's just always a reminder, bringing my body, my soul, my mind back into connection of, oh, this is a new thing. This makes me feel anxious. And even though I feel that way, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And just coming back to that like gratitude of how fucking awesome is it to get to experience something new, and just really anchoring that into the heart of like, I'm up leveling and this is how it's going to be. Just, yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on. We could just keep tapping here. But it just comes back to that idea of reconnecting with your intention and getting your mind, body, spirit into the same place of like, this present moment, this now is the only place, only time I can create change. I can impact action right now. And by tapping, we can come back into that place, that moment, and get back to our power.
Yes. I'm moved to share this idea about ego death that I heard from one of my teachers, Kyle Cease. He taught on this about 6 months ago, and I've examined it every time I've felt suicidal thoughts. And it's something that I've dealt with a lot as a person in my life, and really have a lot of tools around how I deal with those. But the concept of seeing suicidal thoughts as a form of ego death, right? Like there's a part of you that's dying, that thinks that your value was attached to this thing and it's dying, is like inspiring these suicidal thoughts. And like, I like that concept. It helps me feel, I mean, some of my favorite artists and creatives are also people who struggle with this, which is why I'm so open about it, because I just want to normalize it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, you can stay alive and also experience these thoughts, right? Like, and normalizing that those come up, and that now I have tools, like I just tap it out, like I breathe through it. I remind myself of all the bargains I've made. Like, I have to watch It's a Wonderful Life before I make any big decisions, right? Like, it was my stepmom's favorite movie. We watched it at Christmas every year, but it's like, it's a movie that's for all times, like anytime you need to remember that, like, your life matters and who you are and how you connect to people matter. Like, we're all part of this big whole anyway. So I just want to talk about that as like something that's been coming up for me a lot around ego death, that I think might help somebody out there who experiences that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to any thought that doesn't feel good, it's just a reminder we need to change what direction we're looking in. And especially if it is serious thoughts, like suicidal thoughts,
Yeah.
it's just a love sign from the universe that, like, it's time to change direction. And tapping is once again, one of those ways to help you do that. And it's not something you need anyone else to really do for you. When it comes down to in the moment, if you're really feeling it, you don't need anyone else to help you feel better. And that's what I love teaching people, is how to help yourself feel better so you can advocate for your own wellness, whether that's at the doctor's or just, at home, deciding, okay, this is what I'm going to do to make me feel better, especially when those bad, really yucky thoughts come up. Because once again, that's just another sign that is old programming that just needs to go. Your body's holding on to it because it's something led it to being there. And it doesn't matter why, right? It's not about the why. It's all about the, what am I going to do next?
Yeah. And sometimes the why is survival. Like, we needed those things to survive when we were very little and we didn't have choices. And now that we're grown-ups, we have choices. And
yes,
thought work really, for me, is a reminder of my choices. Like, I don't choose that first thought, but I can choose that second, third, and subsequent thought. Sometimes it's harder, like when they're really, really hard thoughts. But I just have this like bucket of tools that I use in those times, like teachers I listen to. I did a whole podcast episode about it. I'll put a link to it at the bottom, in addition to the link to the podcast I did previously with Noemi, so you can hear her backstory. Noemi, will you share this ring finger technique that you shared with me? I've been using it and it's really like soothing.
Yeah. So this ring finger technique is called we call it the 9 Gamut when we do the full thing in EFT. But so it's the point between your ring finger and your pinky finger, between so there should be kind of a tender spot, maybe about an inch down, about 2 fingers down ish. So looking between the ridges of your ring finger and in pinky finger. There we go. Yeah. So while you're tapping on that tender point, I love putting it just on my chest, so it's easier to have a point of stability here. And you're tapping on that. If in any moment you're feeling panic, like if you're like really feeling it, like, oh shit, that thing just happened on the news, like my mom said this thing, I saw this whatever on social media, whatever it is, you're feeling a lot of emotion, you just tap on this point and you breathe into where you feel that emotion in your body. Oftentimes, if it's panic, it's going to be in the heart or back of the heart, maybe shoulders, maybe top of the shoulders. But wherever that is in your body, just really breathing into it and saying, okay, this is an emotion and I'm safe. This is an emotion. This is panic. Poof, that's anxiety. That's a what the fuck, whatever it is. That just really calling it out. This is an emotion. This is an emotion and I'm safe. This is an emotion and I'm safe. This is an emotion and this is how I let it go. It's that shift, right? Of realizing this is an emotion and I can let it go. This doesn't control me. This doesn't control me. This is how I love me. This is how I love myself. With each tap, I notice that anxiety and I let it go with each tap. And so if you're doing this, we're just going to gently ease on out of it. Stop tapping here. Let your hand go. Maybe let the fingers shake out a little bit if you're feeling it, especially if you haven't tapped before, and then just let it go. Just breathing into that space again. Just, this is how I let emotions go. And that is enough. I've done enough for today. Just with that 30, 45 seconds of tapping, that's enough. I've shifted how I feel and I've done enough.
And so it is, because I feel shifted. I feel so light and bubbly. I like how sometimes when I tap, I feel effervescent. Like that's to me, like when someone compliments me and calls me effervescent, it's one of my favorite things to hear, because I feel like when I'm being effervescent, feeling bubbly, that's my most authentic, delightful little child self. It's just that bubbly, excited. I have a right to be excited. It's one of my favorite affirmations. Because I think we spend a lot, especially if people out there have been called too much or too flamboyant, like I feel like we try to cram ourselves into an acceptable little micro amount of ourselves, when in fact we are here to fully bloom. We are here to be acorns turning into oak trees. And if people don't want you to be an oak tree, they don't need to be under your shade. They can go find someone else's shade, you know?
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really big important part of that is noticing whose voice it is. Like, is that something I told myself? And if not, that's not mine. I don't need that. That's just a memory. I don't need it. Either side of the hand, gamut point, that's just a memory and I don't need that.
You're such a tapping wizard. I love it so much. Having like knowing Noemi and like how cool and awesome you were before tapping was like your like certification thing, like when you really dove in, like, and now it's like all roads lead to tapping, and it's so easy and it's simple, and like it's a lifestyle. It really is. And you really
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, all roads lead to tapping. I love that.
Okay, so let's talk more about psychedelics. So how do you find toad medicine? When you were like, I watched this Viceland, which by the way, props to journalists who like help create our access to alternative ways of healing. Like, so great. How did you find your toad medicine ceremony?
The universe found it for me and sent it to me.
Oh.
So a friend said, hey, this is happening near you. Are you interested? And so I was like, I just watched this episode with the guy or who's coming by. Of course I'm interested. So I feel like as soon as you know what you want and you put it out there into the universe, if it's something that will serve your highest good, it will be presented to you and you don't need to worry about it.
I allow ease. I allow things to be easy, and just like if it's meant for me, it will come into my path. If it's not meant for me, it's just not yet, or something better.
Exactly. I don't chase, I attract. Everything that's meant for me is on its way.
Yes, so it is. Okay, what other, I know you've done other cool psychedelics that I haven't done yet. What are some other things that you have experienced?
I've tried a few little things here and there, but so because a lot of them are mixed with a bunch of things, it's not something that I should probably be talking about right now, to be honest. But if we're ever talking one-on-one, I'd love to share where I get some things from. But the ones that are more accessible now that I absolutely love and that aren't super euphoric or things that you can't have just, an elevated daily experience with, or the ones that you can have an elevated daily experience with, are things like kratom, which is the powdered leaf of a coffee tree from the Indonesian area. And it is very similar to coffee or alcohol in that it gives you a little bit of an energetic boost in small quantities, but it makes you crash in larger quantities. It also, so we don't like that, but it affects the opioid system. So it's really good for people who are coming off of opioids and who are in significant pain.
That we love.
So it's really, yes. So it's really great for pain. But, as most plant matter is, if it goes through the liver, we want to be making sure we're giving that a lot of love, a lot of dandelion root, milk thistle, things like that. Like anytime you're taking in any kind of, I think, external plant matter, it's really important to help our bodies keep processing that, because that's how we love ourselves, right? So we realize that this plant medicine helps me, and this is how I help my body love the plant medicine. So kratom, that's one of my favorites. I use it almost daily instead of caffeine or alcohol, like in the evenings if I'm out with friends, back in the day when that used to happen. I would just do kratom instead, because there's no hangover, there's no come down, and it just makes me feel so much better, and I never feel angry.
And I never feel angry. I love that.
Yeah. Another one is kava. I love kava extract. So that one usually for later on in the day when I would have reached for a glass of wine or something like that. Kava extract in like a little bit of juice, something like citrusy especially, is a really nice way to end the day.
I like that. How do you use psilocybin?
So psilocybin, I usually microdose. I like once a quarter, I'll do probably like a little bit of a longer and more extended afternoon experience, but the way I think psilocybin has really affected my life, or really improved, enriched my life, is through just microdosing 3 days off, 4 days off, 3 days on, 4 days off, with a combination of other medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane and chaga.
I love
So
that.
yeah, so I love that people are talking about this more and more. So finding people who extract the resources themselves has been really heart opening, knowing that these people actually work with the mushrooms themselves and really love the product that they're creating. That makes me feel more comfortable bringing it into my own body temple.
I'm really excited to grow my own my psilocybin. Like I like the idea of like talking to it, and like just like I talk to my plant Cecilia, which her name is intentionally sung because I always want to be singing to her. But like, you know what I mean? Like just like nurturing and loving the medicine that then I'm then gonna bring into my body. Just like I also have fantasies of growing intentions of growing my own cannabis plants for use as medicine, because especially as like a person who hopefully will birth children, when you use your DNA with the plant, like you can actually start a seed of cannabis in your own spit, and then it absorbs, like the DNA of the plant absorbs your DNA, and then it becomes like the medicine that it creates is intentionally available for what your body needs, and then potentially more healing for your children, like the children who carry your DNA, right? Like, so it's really interesting. I learned this from a metaphysician who's also like a super plant person. Beautiful Existence. I've had her on the podcast. She taught me that. And so like that got in my head, and I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna make my own medicine. Like, we're gonna talk to the mushrooms. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I feel like anything that you're bringing into your body, if you bless it, it will absolutely make that experience that much more satisfying.
100%. Essential oils too, and like, you know, cannabis, plant medicine, plant spirit, all of that. And like, I also love how psilocybin rewires the brain, right? Psychedelics, our bodies are just meat sacks with salt water in them, right? And with electrodes, like electric snappiness, like going through, right? And so like the way our brains are, and we don't know, like there's a ton of brain science, and there's still so much we don't know about the human brain. It's fascinating. It uses most of our calories. So it's like sparking up there, and the psilocybin help us rewire our brain. It creates more neuroplasticity for us. So if you're combining psilocybin use with other mindfulness practices, most of the people I know microdose. I am a party dose. I didn't like microdosing. It felt like I was like almost orgasming and not hitting climax, right? And so I was just like, well, if this is what I like to have fun, I like to party, I like to experience joy, and I like to dance. And so I therapeutically party dose probably about once a month, like for my brain. In the height of the drama of seasonal depression, I might do it every other week. You know, and just like, you know, have that like sparkiness, but in conjunction with all the meditation and the yoga and the mindfulness practices and all the things I do, and the plants I nourish myself with, because the more you nourish yourself with whole foods, I know you talk about this a lot, like it's like the types of nutrition you're bringing into your body is how you're creating your new cells. And if you want to create new neuroplasticity and new neural pathways, you want to be nourishing yourself in ways that like helps that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our bodies can detox, right? We know how to do that. That's what our kidneys are great at, livers help, etc. But when it comes down to putting things in our body that it doesn't recognize, like any artificial products, unnatural sweeteners, anything like that, that puts your body into that state of panic. And it takes longer than just a couple of days, unfortunately, to detox that kind of thing. So if we're really going for healthy cells, we need to stay hydrated, and we need to not put things in our body that it doesn't recognize.
Water in, water on, water through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Noemi, will you talk about so you grew up in Hungary. We talked about this in our previous podcast episode. I'm curious if you could talk about like your experience of not being a person who consumes the news intentionally and being very intentional about like what comes into you, but also a person who grew up in Eastern Europe who is now witnessing like an insecure man creating a war where there was no war.
Yeah. So if this would have happened 3 years ago, I feel like I would be probably much more tuned into the news right now, under the assumption that the more I care, the more strongly I felt about things happening, the more I had any kind of way of controlling it. I used to feel like me caring was how I controlled things. But since, the pandemic and like obviously getting into tapping and really tuning into how I want to feel and understanding that the only thing I have control over is what's in my vicinity right now, I've chosen to turn off the news about things that I can't control. And that's given me freedom. Absolutely. Because, like, yes, my family is, or part of my family is in Hungary right now, and that's scary. But I also know that there's nothing I can do about it other than sending them my positive thoughts, telling them how much I love them, and making sure I'm holding space for what energy that they are ready to release, because that is something I can help with. But what doesn't help is feeling sorry for anyone else.
Yeah. That's such a good perspective. So healthy, Noemi.
Freedom.
Did this all come about just because you just wanted to feel better and you just realized more and more this is like not feel better?
I think it was the gentle unfolding and shedding process of these things that I used to use to cope with not feeling good. And while I let go of the habits that made me not feel good, like, drinking caffeine, being tuned into the news, being super politically active, as I let go of those and learned instead to love my own inner peace, that was how I was able to shift and really feel good about it. And especially when it feels like, and this is a heavy topic, but sometimes it feels like by ignoring the news, we're spiritually bypassing. But I don't agree with that, because we don't have any control over about a lot of the stuff that we're seeing. And by tuning into our own sense of autonomy of what we can control and really acting from that place of presence, that is how we become more spiritual, not bypassing other people's suffering. Because by focusing on other people's suffering, we're not helping them feel better, right? It's all about helping us feel better. And then once we're feeling good, that is when we can actually take action and do something about it, but not while we're watching other people suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't alleviate someone else's suffering by suffering for them.
No.
If it works, I also really identify with that idea of like, if I care a lot, that means I can control something. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, like, you can care and love without having your hands in it, and like, I feel like
so that's the thing. If we're thinking about like it from an active perspective, what does it mean to care? Like, the only time I can actually care and do something is when my cup is full. Mm. Right? Because otherwise we're just lamenting, having, perhaps sympathy for others, but that doesn't change anything.
Word.
Right? That's freedom, is realizing I don't have to feel bad for you, even if you feel bad. Sorry, that's not my issue.
Yeah, it's almost like I love the concept of like, identifying with someone, connecting to them, but then raising them up to how, like, to your vibration or to how you feel. Like, just like it's instead of getting in the mud with someone, it's like reminding them that there's a space outside the mud. And but also like with compassion and care, because stuff in life is hard and people are, it's interesting because like there's like this hierarchy of bypassing. Saline talked about this actually in her meditation just yesterday. I'm just still thinking about it. It's like there's this concept of like gratitude, right? Like, gratitude is so important. Like, you can't be grateful and frustrated at the same time. Like, gratitude is an encompassing emotion, and it's really like the place that like appreciation feeling tone, which is like almost like a difference than gratitude. That like Abraham Hicks talks about it a lot, right? Like, so you can have gratitude, but like also sometimes you can use gratitude to bypass things rather than remembering that your contrast is about teaching you that, there's a new level for you and there's some things you need to change. And like, you can be grateful for the work you get to do to change and like all of that kind of stuff. But it's like easy to use gratitude to like, bypass your work, right? Bypass the lessons you need to learn.
So I think it's about comparison. When we're showing gratitude because, at least mine's not that bad, then that's not where the real magic of that energy. That's comparison of, yours is worse, so I get to feel good. No, it's about appreciating that, like, this these are the good things in my life, and this is what I want to focus on. And then also appreciating someone else's experience, but letting them be however they want to feel about it, and not letting that get into my space. I believe it's all about loving with an open hand. This is what I have to offer. You can come here if you want, but I'm not going to go there. My boundary is my open hand. You can come here, you can help, or help yourself with my magic. I can show you the path that I'm on, but that's all. Like, you can choose to come here, but that is your choice. And I am not stepping out of this magical boundary that is my life.
Yes, absolutely. And there's like this heavy expectation sometimes that people have with their own projections that like because I feel bad, I want you to feel bad. Because I feel limited, I want you to feel limited. And like, because I suffer, I want you to suffer.
Because I had a bad life, I can't feel good, and you should feel bad for me too.
Yeah. I had someone once like really violently like comment when I talked about, I stopped watching the news, and like, I stopped watching TV news or listening to NPR in September of 2016. When I realized I felt bad every time I heard the 45th president's voice, right? Like, when I heard that voice all the time, I was like, I don't feel good. I don't consent to hearing his voice. I don't want to hear it ever again. So anytime I've heard his voice ever since, it's not been my choice. And I'm an adult now and I can make choices. And when I was a kid, I didn't have choices, right? So now I have choices. I'm making choices about how I receive information and from whom I receive information. And I curate that. And I've been thinking a lot about like getting off Instagram and detaching from that platform as something where my creative self is working. And it is, however, the way that I connect to most of the journalists that I trust. I don't necessarily find Twitter to be a particularly better choice, right? But it is another information stream that I found useful in the pandemic to know from healthcare workers that I trust in the field, like what is actually going on versus all of the mega billion corporations, including big pharma, who profit off of this pandemic. I mean, like Moderna and Pfizer are grateful for the vaccines, but they're obviously making a ton of money because the government is paying them for these vaccines. Like, they're not free because Moderna's, giving us a deal. They're free because the government is paying for it. And they, donated $8 million to Joe Biden's campaign. This is all follow the money, right? But so I think about like who's deciding what is news, right? And so for me, I trust specific creators to tell me when something important is happening, right? And so I'm thinking about like ways in which I can curate my information streams to be the information I need to know, and like journalists that I trust. So there's anyway, I'm really into the mycelial network of like Patreon creators and self-care providers, and like self-care like tool providers in many ways, right? Like that we've created through the Glowing Goddess Getaway. Like, you have a Patreon now, and we have like artists and creators of all sorts, and including one of our own who's a journalist. And I was like, I would love to have 2 minutes of the news curated by you every day, and that's how I want to get my news. So
yeah, exactly. It's all about like where you're turning your attention.
Yeah.
And really choosing what kind of news you want to bring into your life, because there's so much going on in the world. Like, you could choose to focus in on the COVID pandemic if you want to, but the thing is you don't have to. And that's another experience of being a fully capable adult, is choosing how I want to experience life. I don't need to be tuned into the news, especially if it's not affecting my immediate life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, COVID like affects my immediate life because I choose to be COVID cautious, and my ethics are I don't want to carry the virus, pass it to anyone, or experience it. So those are protocols I need. And as that science continues to evolve, I want to receive that information, but I don't necessarily need to watch. I mean, and this is also part of why I want to get off IG, is like, I don't want to watch people doing things that I think are unsafe and don't feel like community care.
Yeah.
To me, like,
Yeah,
it's hard to watch people make these choices, and like it's hard because I know we're all in this together, and it's like I'm watching people get an F on the group assignment, and I don't like it.
Yeah, for me, as someone who believes that all illness comes from energetic states, it's just really hard to see people be like tuning into that COVID stuff and knowing that that's why they're going to get sick, is because they're thinking about it. It is what it is, though, unfortunately. And that, once again, is my open hand. You can come with me. We can party on Discord. We can change how we feel. We can tune into whatever it is that we want to manifest, or you can do whatever it is you want on your own. But I'm not going that way anymore.
God, I fully agree.
Totally.
I love you so much, Noemi. Will you tell us how we can party with you? If people want to heal with you, how do they find you?
Yes, thank you, Bevin. So I do most of my work now on Patreon or through Patreon. So I have 2 live classes a week. One is usually Sundays that I'm calling Feel Good Tapping, which is a short 20 to 30-minute group circle where we work on just releasing emotions. I do 3 easy rounds of tuning into how we're feeling, accepting how we're feeling, and then letting go of any other idea that we need to be doing more. So that's a 20 to 30-minute session every Sunday. You can get access to that either through my Patreon if you join my membership, or you can join individual classes, just donation based. Probably the link will be here at some point, so you can catch that. And then on Wednesdays, I do something called Manifestation Club, which has been the expansion of my own Ganja yoga class, where now I focus on movement, energy practices, meditation, and then journaling. And then we all get to share at the end if anything comes through the journaling practice. But Bevin, something that I've learned from you is how important the community aspect of getting together and sharing space online is. It's one thing to do a class together, but it's another thing to really connect and get to hold space for each other's dreams and visions and feelings. So that's what I do Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific. So yeah, that's Patreon. I'm on Discord now. I've been sharing a lot of really interesting up levels, energy practices, my own playlists, and what I've been doing for my own self-care. And then the last way is through Instagram. I guess I'm on Facebook too, but mainly Instagram if you want to catch a little bit about what I'm working on now, some offers I have, or if you want to come work with me one-on-one, because that's where the magic is, when we can really go deep into what is keeping you from living that amazing life that you want, and we can tap through it. We can physically let go of the energy that's keeping you from living the life you want. So if you want to do that, come join me. I have a couple of spots opening up this spring, and I'd love to hold space for you if you're ready to become your own energy master.
Noemi, what are the URLs for people who are just listening and want to be typing this into their browser? Patreon.com/
Noemi Sparks, Noimisparks, my name.
I can't believe someone who's into Ganja yoga has a last name named Sparks. I think it's so appropriate.
I think it's so divinely perfect that I believe it 100%.
It can be that great. And then Instagram is I am Noemi Sparks.
Yep, that's me. I am Noemi Sparks. And Discord is Energy Mastery Club, but I think there you just need the invite link to get in. I don't know if you can search for it on Discord right now.
I'm still trying to figure out how all that stuff works, because I started on my Discord, I started doing kind of something similar. Like I'm moving my diary from my Instagram stories into the Discord just so that it's available. If people miss a day, they're not missing anything, because it doesn't delete in 24 hours. I might delete it. I might delete the old stuff, but like to keep it fresh. But like, you get at least a week to catch up on what I'm up to. And also Noemi's a great DJ. So Noemi's playlists are fire. I say this as someone who's a total music snob and like does not think everyone's playlists are fire. So
thank you so much. I do love making playlists. That's something I love sharing. So if you want to come on my Discord, I've got so many playlists there that are ready for you.
Yes. And as a person in a larger body, I find Noemi's online yoga very accessible and easy to modify for myself, or create variations for myself if I need to. But like super relaxing, very restorative practice. Ganja yoga is slow. There's no rush. Like I like that.
Yeah, it's almost always a completely seated practice, because if you are partaking in cannabis or any other plant medicine, I'd love you to stay grounded.
Yes, literally.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Noemi, for your time, your wisdom, your connection. And I sure hope people out there felt the healing and the love and will reach out and connect with you, because you are a divine vessel, constantly creating new amazing things. I feel like, by this time next week, there will be some new cool thing Noemi's doing. So
thank you so much. I'm so here for it. Thank you, Bevin, so much. And anyone who's listening to this, if you are aligned with what I'm speaking about, if this resonates with you, I'm calling you in, sister. Let's do this. I want you to experience the freedom every single day. You deserve it.
Yay. Love you so much.
You.